Hey, all my legacy leaders out there. Want to come and say happy Monday to you. Again, we're here with a legacy leadership moment. We're talking about our Empower method and the 7 steps to empower your team to get more fulfillment from your leadership, to have less stress, and to get the best out of your team on everything that you do. So basically, I wanted to recap really quickly. We've been talking about the Empower method, and we're on step 4 today. We've been working on this. We've been through the first 3 steps, and so if you remember, step 1 is the E step. Examine and evaluate your expectations, making sure that your expectations are reasonable, making sure that you're not asking too much of your team, and basically setting your team up for failure. We want to start off by setting them up for success. The second piece of that, the M step, is to measure their expectations so that you make sure that they don't put too much on themselves. Remember, you are the arbiter. You are the person that determines what is success for your team. They don't determine what's success. You determine what success is. So it's important that you make sure that you measure their expectations, that you help them as they navigate that process, because a lot of times if they're struggling with something, or if it seems a little bit more difficult than they had anticipated, they begin to internalize that and makes them think that there's something wrong with them, right? So step 3 we talked about was proper delegation, and we went over the 5 key delegation points, right? The 5 principles of delegation: clarity, aspiration, inspiration, trust, and ownership. And we went over how in order to truly delegate, right, the definition of delegation is to empower one to act, right? So in order to delegate, you have to be empowering, you have to be enabling, you have to be setting your people up to take on the task and to run with it. And so today, what we're going to move into is step 4, and this is to optimize your environment for growth. Again, this is the O step of the Empower method, to optimize your environment for growth, right? And so the basic idea, what we're going to be looking at, is we're going to be redefining our views on failure. And we're going to do that in three ways, right? Number 1, we're going to minimize the fear of failure. Number 2, we're going to learn to trust the process and to build trust in the process. And number 3, we're going to maximize the second try. All right, so again, that was minimize the fear of failure, learn to trust the process, build trust into the process, and 3, maximize the second try. So the first thing in redefining our views on failure, I want to read you a couple of quotes that are really important and kind of really speak to this understanding of what failure is, right? So the first one is from former Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff and former Secretary of State, United States of America, General Colin Powell, says, "There are no secrets to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure." Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, said it this way: "Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of a greater or equal benefit." And then H. Stanley Judd, phenomenal author, said, "Don't be afraid to fail. Don't waste energy trying to cover up failure. Learn from your failures and go on to the next challenge. It's okay to fail. If you're not failing, you are not growing." I want you just to think about that last part for a second. If you're not failing, you are not growing. Now, so much of what we learn in school and what we've learned in our lives is to be afraid of failure, that failure is bad, that failure is wrong, that if you are failing, then that means that that you have some kind of issue with you. And generally it's about your integrity or your work ethic or something about your discipline or your perseverance, right? We've learned to fear failure. But I would posit to you that we want to actually develop the habit of failing early, failing often, and failing forward. And we want to cultivate that type of an environment with the teams that we lead. Again, we want to fail early, we want to fail often, and we want to fail forward. And here's the reason why. We as human beings are engineered to learn pattern recognition. That's the way that our brain works. We see that things happen and we get certain results, and we then are able to determine what will happen and to get an idea of what will happen in the future based on what's happened in the past. But here's the key. If you keep doing the same things, you're going to keep getting the same results. So the only way to grow is to do different things and learn from them so that you can now bring that information back into your experience as you're going forward. But our culture teaches us the exact opposite. Our culture teaches us, and think about this, from the time we go to school all the way through what we do in our corporate lives, in our higher educational lives, what we learn is that failure is wrong, right? You learn to stay within the rules and to not fall out, to not go outside the lines, to not color outside the lines. And when we're given tests, right, in school, you're shown how many you got wrong. Doesn't matter that you got 85% of everything right, and that's not celebrated. You're shown that you got 15% wrong, and you're told to focus on that 15%, what you did wrong, right? And the idea is that somehow you're deficient. The people who get the best scores, the people who get the best jobs, the people who get scholarships, the people who get promotions are the people who make the fewest mistakes, not the people who learn the most, not the people who make the most progress. And that's something that's very important for you to understand, because those are the people that are coming to you. Those are the people that are coming to your team. They've been conditioned to try to not make mistakes. And here's the problem with trying to not make mistakes. Trying to not make mistakes creates a culture where you want to stay in what is safe. It creates a culture where innovation doesn't happen. It creates a culture where initiative is not taken. It creates a culture where people stay within the parameters that they know and that they understand. And as a leader, if your people are not willing and not comfortable of stepping outside of their box, of stepping outside of their comfort zone, then that means that you will continue to have to be the innovator, to take the initiative, to do all of the extra work. You can never delegate, you can never empower, because your people are afraid to step outside of that box. So we want to encourage them to fail early, fail often, and fail forward, right? Our zero defect mentality that we've created, it leads our people to want to be unwilling to take risks, to be unwilling to even ask questions or think outside of how we think, right? And the problem with that is that we can't grow. You get people who are very good at doing the same thing over and over, but then they can't grow to where they need to be, right? And the crucial thing I want you to remember is that success is built on failure, right? If you're not failing, you're not growing. And so it's tremendously important that your people understand that it's okay to make mistakes. And so how do we get them to be okay with making mistakes, right? How do we get them to the point where they're comfortable saying, I made a mistake and I'm going to learn, right? That's our job as a leader. Our job as a leader is to change the paradigm for our people, to give them the comfort, to give them the space, to create the space for them to grow. And I want you to think back to, if you have children or if you've ever seen anyone with a young child learning to walk, right? The way that we teach children to walk and to talk is completely different than the way that we teach children after they get into school. Before school, everything that we're teaching them about is about promoting where we want them to go, right? We don't stop a child when they fall down and say, no, don't do it that way. We don't stop a child when they're trying to walk and they go to step the wrong direction. And we don't stop them and try to keep them from making the mistakes, because we trust the process. We understand that if they just keep going at it, they're going to learn to walk. And that's why step 2 of redefining our views on failure is to build trust in the process, and for us to trust the process as the leaders, right? The whole idea is that you have to be certain, you have to understand that your people are going to get it, that your process is going to work. Now, how do we do that, right? We create checks and balances in the process that give us the comfort and give us the knowledge that it's going to work, right? Now, I want you to look at it again. We talk about traditional management. Traditional management does have check-ins. Traditional management, people check up on deadlines and do things like that. But here's the distinction. In traditional management, those check-ins are for the manager. Those check-ins are so that the manager feels like, okay, we're going to make deadline, we're going to get there on time. The check-ins are not for the person that's actually doing the job, for the person who is supposed to be empowered, right? However, with empowering leadership, what we talk about in legacy leadership is that you want to make your check-ins about your people, right? Because in the traditional management model, too many check-ins makes people feel like you're micromanaging them. It makes people feel like you don't trust them to do the job. It makes people feel like they want to stay within their box and not do anything outside of it, because the check-in is for the manager. It's not for the person who's being. It's not for the person who's being. Who's doing the work. So we have to talk about something that's important when we're talking about building trust, and this is kind of the elephant in the room, right? You can't really trust your people until you trust your people, and that's okay. Right? I'm not asking you to just go and assume that they're going to get it done and everything's going to be hunky-dory and it's going to be great. That would be naive, right? What we understand is that your people are growing, your people are on this journey. But the issue is you do need to trust the process. And in building the process and trusting the process, what you can know is that even if you build the process the right way, right, and you plan for failure, then you can use that failure to get you to the success that you need to go to. So the idea of the empowering leaders to have empowering check-ins that are actually anticipatory of the person not necessarily being where they need to be, and that being okay, because that is a place where you get to teach. That is a place where you get to facilitate them learning and them growing, right? The idea, and I wrote this down, I wanted you to see this, empowering check-ins can't be too frequent. They should be planned in advance, and as you're checking in with your people, the questions that you're asking them and the discussion that you're having with them is designed to lead them to the answer rather than telling them what to do. The difference between the empowering check-in and the micromanaging check-in is that the micromanaging check-in is just interested in progress answers. You're just checking, is it done? Are you having any problems, right? And then generally what happens is the person, the leader, solves the problems in the micromanaging check-in. The empowering check-in is different. The empowering check-in goes as a support system that asks questions that help facilitate the person who is to be empowered to find the answers for themselves and to reassure them that they're capable of solving the problem. It's a tremendous difference, because what it does is it changes the dynamic from your people when you're coming around feeling like you're constantly going to be checking on them or there's something that's going to be wrong, to them looking forward to when you come around, because when you come around, you help them work out the problems that they may have been facing, and they feel accomplished. And that's the difference, because they were still in the same failure place either way. But the key is you help them to trust the process, because every time you come around, you help them to get to the answers rather than solving their problems for them. And here is why this is so important, because by minimizing their fear of failure, you increase their willingness to step outside the box, their willingness to take initiative, their willingness to do more. And in doing so, it creates a culture of learning from their failures. And this creates exponential growth in your team. And so the last step, the last thing that we talked about, step 3, right, is to then maximize the second try. Since we are not starting from a position where failure is a problem, we know that people are going to make mistakes, that they're not necessarily going to be on the right track, and that we're going to make slight adjustments, slight corrections in concert with our people rather than doing the work for them. Now we can maximize their second try, because they're not trying to cover up a failure with their second try. Instead, they're learning from a failure, and they're taking that knowledge and they're making their second try even better. So I want you to be clear here. This idea of changing how we think about failure does not just take pressure off of your people. It takes pressure off of you. It leaves room for you to not be clear. It leaves room for you to not be perfect. It leaves room for you to learn in your leadership relationship with them just as much as they do. So it leaves room also for you to model the behavior that you want for them to have, right? And so I want to kind of finish up a little story. This is from back when I was in graduate school, right? One of the things I had gone from undergraduate and always thinking, I would write my papers last minute, take all-nighters, do whatever I did, because in my mind I was convinced that I did my best work under pressure. And I did decent work, but it never felt, or I never understood what other people felt like when they knew that they did work. I constantly felt like I did good work, but every once in a while I would get different results from my professors. But when I was in graduate school, I decided to take a different tact. I decided to have every paper done at least 3 days before it was due. And in that time, what I did is I would have the first draft done 3 days before it was due. And then I would take a day off and I wouldn't look at the paper at all. And then I would come back to it. I would proofread it. I would edit it. And what was amazing with that process was it took the pressure off of me in writing the first draft to be perfect. And then it also allowed me to see and to make connections that I wasn't able to make in the writing. And so during my time in graduate school, I wrote some of the best work that I ever wrote. I got A's on just about everything that I turned in. And not only that, when I turned the papers in, I knew that they were good. I knew that, and as a matter of fact, just to be clear, I got an A on everything that I turned in. There was one semester where I turned a lot of stuff in late, and so I got it in. I got B's on that one. That was one of the B's that I got. But the point being, everything that I did in this process, when I followed this process, not only did my work get better, but I was able to do more. I was able to be more insightful. I was able to bring in more ideas from various areas. I was able to synthesize a bunch of different topics and conversations. And so I was able to actually do better work. So how does this affect you? How is this good for your leadership? What it allows for when you trust the process, when you start by minimizing the fear of failure, and when you build trust in the process for your people, that they trust that when you come around, that there's going to be facilitation, there's going to be help, and they trust that when they fail, it's going to be okay. They're going to have an opportunity to overcome it. What you allow for, right, is for them to maximize that second try. And here's the interesting thing. In the beginning of doing this, it's going to seem just like your normal management style. It's going to seem like it takes just as much time. But here's where you get the compounding effect, an increase in energy and time efficiency, right? As you get more proficient, as you create your culture, both you and your team will get better about recognizing failure. And many of the failures that would normally have, right, that you would normally have to point out to your team, many of the things, the mistakes that you would normally have to get them to understand, they will begin to be able to self-correct because you've taught them the process. Just like, and I want you to go back to remembering children learning to walk. Initially, you hold their hands and you help them go through it, but eventually they figure out how to stand up on their own. They figure out how to walk on their own. They figure out how to balance and stabilize. They remember when they took that step and it didn't work out, and they develop the ability to do exactly what you did, which is to facilitate them maximizing their second try. And this is where the benefit comes. Because now, as your people begin to take initiative, as your people begin to step outside the box, as your people begin to not fear failure, their innovation and the skills that they bring to the table begin to manifest themselves. And you have to do less and less work, and they begin to create things that you would have never been able to think about, to imagine. And that's where empowering leadership really takes off, right? Because that is the place where now you have facilitated the manifestation of greatness in your team members, and now they're more productive than you could have ever gotten them to be. And they're more productive than you could have ever been in that field because they're hired to do something that you don't have a skill in. So as we look at this, you're optimizing your environment for growth, because by doing so, by removing the fear of failure from your team, you unleash their creative capabilities. You unleash their innovation. You unleash their initiative. And by doing so, you gain the exponential rewards of the greatness that is within each and every one of them. So I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope this has been helpful. This, again, has been step 4 of our Empower Method. If you want to hear more about the Empower Method, you can go ahead and check out my book, Why Can't People Just Do Their Jobs? The Empowering Leader's Guide to Having More Fulfillment, Less Stress, and Getting the Best Out of Your Team on every project. It's available on Amazon, but if you would like to get a free copy or find out how you can get access to a free copy, I'd love for you to have access to the book. Just go ahead in the bottom in the comments here, go ahead and comment on our on the video and ask about the free book, and we'll go ahead and have my team shoot out that information for you. So appreciate you tuning in. Hope that you have a wonderful, blessed Monday. Remember that every day is a blessing, every day is a gift, and therefore remember to live every day like it was on purpose. Have a great one.